Good afternoon. Today is the second day of November 2014, and we are with my beloved friend Anahita, Sanjana. Welcome, Anahita. There are so many things I want to ask you, but I think the first thing that we always ask everyone is, how did you first hear of Mother and Sri Aurobindo?
So there's a bit of a story to it, if you'll be patient to hear.
Certainly.
Because I started my journey into spirituality with Buddhism, and for many years I practiced the breath meditation, etc. And years ago, a colleague of mine, Veera Dastur, gave me a book of Sri Aurobindo's, and I just said, oh, supramental, this is not for me, and I put it away. So I had to go through 7-8 years of searching.
Approximately what year did he give you that book?
I must have been about 23 then.
Uh-huh.
So that would have been maybe 93. And then in 97, I went on a trekking holiday to Himachal. And it was the first trek I had outdoors. I'd never been out in nature like that.
Oh.
Not in the Himalayas. And I just felt I was in another world. Everywhere I looked, there was like looking at a postcard. Everywhere there was beauty and, I used to just leave the group and I used to sit by the BS River and just weep and write poetry, and that went on for many days. And I came back to Bombay feeling different, but I didn't know how to put it. But in a week of coming back to Bombay, I got this illness. I got what is called urticaria, hives, and all over my body, swollen lips, swollen eyes. And I tried everything I could. I tried Ayurveda, homeopathy, nothing worked. And I was at my wit's end, and the same colleague, Veera Dastur, who teaches it with me at JB Petit, she said, Mother talks about yogic illnesses, which is when the physical body can't keep pace with the spiritual growth. And that time I wasn't practicing Hatha Yoga so as much as I am now. So my body may not have been in great shape. So I told her, please, I want to read more about it because I just don't know where to turn. Nothing is helping. Not even antihistamines were helping beyond a point. So she got me a little booklet. It was an All India magazine. And I was sitting in a doctor's clinic and I opened the book. And on the first page, there's a picture of the mother. And there were her lines, something to the effect that I belong to the divine completely. And I'm willing to give him my blood drop by drop if he, I think it's in the Rad, I don't know where it's from. But I saw her picture and I read those words, and I was sitting in a doctor's clinic and I just wept and wept and wept. And that was my initiation, just her picture and her words. So, and I read that little booklet and it was so beautiful. I could just drink it in and drink it in and drink it in. Then Veera took me to the Bombay Center. Then I came to Pondicherry, and that's how it all began.
So, when did you meet Dan Palkiwala?
So I found Mother in, say, about June 97. I was doing Hatha Yoga at Kevalya Dham, another center in Bombay, and I was very delighted with my teacher. I wasn't looking for a new teacher. But somebody invited me for a talk on food, which Dhananti's son and my current yoga teacher, Jangir, was giving. And I saw Mother and Sri Aurobindo's pictures there, the same hall where you came. And I was stumped because in Bombay, it's not usual to find their pictures in many houses. And I just knew that because their pictures were there, I had to come to him for yoga. And that's how I came to him for yoga, and that's how I met all the Palkiwalas.
I see.
Yeah.
And when did you first come to Pondicherry?
I came to Pondicherry maybe May 98, a year after I found the Mother. Yeah.
So Of course, I want to ask all about your work with students and at the two different universities, J.B. Petit and Bombay International. When did you begin that work?
So I qualified myself as a biomedical engineer, but I was very unhappy working in the corporate. And that this was in 92, I hadn't found the mother then. But I had a great faith in our fire temples, so I used to talk to the fire. I never used to read from books. So one day I was in a fire temple and I was telling the fire that I'm very unhappy. What is my instrument to play? Because currently what I'm doing doesn't feel like it's my instrument. So just a thought popped in, I remember now in Savagery there's this line, even through the mists of mortal thought, infallible are thy mysterious steps. So my mortal thought was misty, confused, but there was such a clear thought that Guru J.B. Petit. That's where I studied. I'm a student.
That's where you studied?
Yes.
You were a graduate of
I did till my 10th standard there. So I went and met my principal without any thought, and I told her I wanted to teach. Now in Bombay, teaching at that time wasn't a very socially high up thing. Because if you're an engineer, you're supposed to make money, you're supposed to do all that. And she looked at me and said, oh, you've done engineering and you want to teach. And next sentence was, you've done engineering and you will teach. So she gave me maths to teach for a teacher who was going on pregnancy leave. Now it was blasphemous in those days to leave engineering and come into being a school teacher. So I thought I'd do it for 2 months and I'll go back to the corporate. I started teaching. I just felt very beautiful after each class. I felt like I so loved putting things across in a way that minds could pick it up. I loved to see the light on their faces when even concepts of maths and science became clear. But I kept looking for jobs on the side. But even things I should have walked into, I just never got. So again, I understood that her rejections are also a grace. In those days, I felt like, why are all doors closing on me? But it was part of a design. So I never got anything I really wanted to do, and the teacher never came back. So I continued. So I taught maths and science. But even as I taught maths and science, anything that I grew from, I'd give to the children. So if we are doing biology, the thrust would always be to see the immense intelligence that's making every cell in the body work. So studying the miracle that the body is itself, the kids would get a sense of something beyond. So I started teaching biology like that. And then I was going to Solang Valley, this place where I found where this beautiful experience happened, the mountains.
Yes.
So I started taking children on camps to the Himalayas. Anything that was meaningful to me, I felt I had to give it to the kids. So naturally, when Mother happened, that was the ultimately meaningful thing for me. I felt I had to give it to the kids. And I found that the ICSE board, the board of exam that the J.B. Petit was following, was offering yoga as a board subject, as an optional subject. But in about 2000, the year 2000, though the board had been offering it for many years, there was just one school in India which was actually accessing it, and 1 or 2 students were doing it. The curriculum seemed daunting. There was no textbook. 1 or 2 things in the curriculum, in all honesty, I hadn't heard of. But I just felt I had to do it. So I proposed it to my principal. With her grace, she allowed me to. And it was a struggle the first year to do my research, to put together a textbook. After all, it is a board subject. But I could start yoga, I think, in 2001 in J.B. Petit as a board subject, where I got 2.5 hours a week with the children to teach them whatever the curriculum had. And one fated day, one child said, Miss, it's just not fair. You go to Pondicherry all the time. Take us.
Ah,
I hadn't thought of it. And that's what started the yoga camp. So I took my first batch, which was about 12 kids, to Pondicherry in 2002 maybe. And
what age were the children?
about 14. And the Samadhi was something that was completely transforming for them. Matri Mandir, as much so. They had access to various people in those days. Of course, I didn't know you. But Shraddhalu, Vijay Bhai used to do a lot of sessions with them, Sampaji,
Oh,
the rich resource at Auroville, body awareness, Tai Chi, movements with a thrust of taking you inside, exploring your dreams through dance. So all these activities were put together. And I remember the student Aditi told me, Miss, it was the most fun trip I've ever had, but fun in a very different way, in a way that I've never understood. And then I moved out of biology and maths and I came only into yoga. That's when Bombay International told me to come and teach yoga over there.
now by yoga, do you mean primarily hatha yoga, or was it many aspects of yoga?
Well, the practical part is hatha yoga, and the theory has one whole section on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is fabulous. But we also do philosophies like Vedanta, Jainism, Buddhism. We study sages of India like Yajnavalkya, Ved Vyasa. So, and through it all, wherever I don't impose it, but wherever it calls for it, a line of Savagery, a teaching of Sri Aurobindo, something that a life of a sage brings out, but Sri Aurobindo has said. Of course, because that's so much a part of me, it becomes a part of the teaching.
How many students do you have generally in a class?
So, JB, I started with 12, but now it can be anything between 25 to 27. BIS was an interesting story. You know, in India, unfortunately, the youth thinks yoga is something very boring and they should come to when they are old. So when the principal invited me, there were no children who wanted to opt for yoga as a subject. So I told the principal, let me give them one talk. So when I spoke to them, there were about 3 children who came forward to do it. And I must tell you about this very beautiful child, Danish. He was the first boy who came forward, because also it's a thought that yoga is something pansy. You have to be very effeminate to do yoga. Boys don't do yoga, they play rugby. So Danish was the first boy who came in, and Danish was a little ill with some illness which kept him out of school a lot, as a result of which his work suffered. As a result of which there was a problem of social acceptance, many of his peers. And so he was a very sort of a boy who would question everything you say. But something must have clicked, because next he must have spoken about it to his friends. Next day 2 more boys came. And finally I had about 7 kids in my first batch. And I brought them to Pondicherry. And Danish, the first boy to join yoga, he had the most phenomenal experience in Matri Mandir. He said he went in, and first time they allowed only for 10-15 minutes. So he said his eyes were open, he was looking at the crystal globe, and he said there was not one thought in my mind. And he said, Miss, it was the most amazing experience of my life. And he said that, Miss, my room has white walls. Do you think if I tell my parents, they'll get me a crystal globe and I can make a Matri Mandir? So, of course, I had to tell him it wasn't about the physicality of the place. And then somehow when his insight changed, everything outside changed. Of course, in Pondicherry is a very special place. There were a couple of children with us who may be part of the group which wasn't very accepting to Danish. And these boys, out of the blue, after a Samadhi experience, one of them said, Miss, I don't want to do all this to Danish, but I don't know what makes me do it. And he was by himself crying, feeling guilty
So
for
they were bullying him in a
they
way?
were maybe not
or just
accepting,
not
him
accepting him
fully.
Mhm.
But they realized it without me
Yeah.
saying. Just taking them to Samadhi made them realize. And they said, Miss, we are going to go back and we are going to change and we are going to make the whole class change towards him. And they did. And I brought them in October. 2 months, Danesh was ecstatic. He had friends, he was popular, his health improved. And then in January, I get a call saying Danesh had met with an accident and he was no more. So to me, it was like his soul was waiting for this experience in Matri Mandir. And really, his best friend said these 2 months of his life between the accident and Matri Mandir were the best in his life. So really, I owe a lot to Danesh. He was the first boy who had the guts to explore yoga. And yeah, he'll always be very special.
Now you have many young girls in your classes.
Yes.
And they have had some powerful experiences
Yes.
here. Can you
Yes.
talk about a few of them? Or also in Bombay?
Yes. Yes. So there was also this other student I taught, very destructive in class when I got him, and had to punish him many times. And I brought him to Pondicherry, and I remember we'd explored the Heart Center. We explore a lot of it even through Hatha Yoga. We do asanas exploring that. So I remember him sitting at the Samadhi with his hand on his heart and doing a certain Ujjayi breath. Very sweet he looked. But I know that he'd be the last to get up from the Samadhi. And, somebody who couldn't sit still for a minute in Bombay, for 40 minutes he would sit and I'd have to wake him out of it. And he wrote when he came back that, till I was 3rd or 4th standard, I was a very happy child. Then I was diagnosed with severe dyslexia and my marks fell and I had many issues. I lived in fear all the time. And then when I came back to Pondi, I retasted that happiness. And he says, now my only fear is that I mustn't lose this happiness. And Bombay is a challenging environment. He's had sort of going back to his old way of being, coming back, but he always comes back. And he says that even when he's very lost in the environment, he'll be guided to a book by the mother. He'll read something which exactly he needs. So that's beautiful. There was another girl who, again, I've always seen that the ones who are most frothy on the surface are the deepest inside. So, yeah. I'm talking about Kajal, you know her.
Yes.
She's very frothy, full of life, resistant earlier to sitting still.
Yeah.
But again, when she went into Matri Mandir, I think she shared with you that she felt this huge energy around her, and it was something so moving that she just wept through that whole experience of feeling something beyond her skin. So, and there have been so many, Narad. I mean, each one, they come back to Bombay a different person. And when they have to write letters to go abroad, for many of them, the experience in Pondi features as a very integral thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about your work with Om.
With Om, well,
and the
Narad,
students.
I have, we always begin our yoga classes with Om and we end with Om.
Singing
Om.
Chanting Om.
Chanting Om.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've met you just about a year ago. And you came down to Bombay and you did your Om choirs with our children there. And for many of them, it was a very, very rich experience. There was one boy who said that he kind of felt high for 2-3 days after that weekend with you. And He said when he went out to party at night, he just couldn't drink a drop of alcohol because he was already feeling so high. So, you know that we have these weekly Savitri sessions at Sarkar,
Yes.
which are largely for the youth, where we pick out themes like relationships, or like what does it mean to take refuge in the mother, and for that maybe exploring deeper what the mother is, what beyond her form. And we have a discussion on them, and then passages from Savitri which breathe life into that discussion. So after you left, the last one we had on this topic, taking refuge in the mother and what it means, and we ended it with an Om choir, exactly as you told me to do it. So we started with a little humming, some voice exercises, and then the Om choir, and then the children have to recite lines from Savitri. So that was beautiful. Then I brought Om choir into my classes. Even before theory classes, we do it. And as I was telling you, there was one child who said, I had a geography test next period, and I was very worried and lots of thoughts in my mind. But after our Om choir, I just felt like they'd all gone and I was at peace.
In your classes, do the students ask about Sri Aurobindo or Mother?
They do.
They do.
Only because the textbook is notes I have compiled for them, because there was no textbook for yoga. And it's full of quotes, whether it's Vedanta, whether it's whatever. Sri Aurobindo has so much to say about, I mean, anything you're teaching, there's something he said about it. So they do ask about him, but largely I tell them more about Mother and Sri Aurobindo when I bring them to Pondicherry. And I wait more for them to ask about them rather than just telling them about it.
How did you come to Savitri?
Yeah.
Because I know how important Savitri is to you.
Oh yes, Narad. I don't have words for it. But I used to go to Nargol for a holiday with my husband. They have a little school, now Sarjan school. And they have a little Samadhi. Samadhi because relics are kept inside. And there's a beautiful picture when this Samadhi was established in, I think, 1950. You can actually see white light descending into it. It's there. So Nargol was always a very special place for me. And one day on the board there were these exquisite words. At the head she stands of birth and toil and fate, and that whole passage. And I read it, and I didn't know where it was from, but it was so, I hadn't even really heard of Savitri then. But it was so beautiful, and at the end I see Savitri and Sri Aurobindo. And I said, I have to pick it up. So I picked it up. It didn't speak to me. I started reading from the beginning. It didn't make so much sense to me. But Nadkarni ji used to visit Bombay then. I attended some of his sessions. And I read one whole sort of length of Savitri, maybe without understanding too much, but one word here, one phrase there would come alive. Then I read it again, and then I read it again. And Narad, each time I would read it, it would fill me up. And I'm not even saying every time, but when she puts me in a state where Savitri can speak to me, I just find I become a different person when I'm reading it. It just pours into my heart. Every word is something that just pours into my heart. And sometimes I do a whole meditation with Savitri, like that passage I was telling you, an innocent and holy ignorance, adored like one who worships a formless God.
Could you recite the whole thing?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Please do.
An innocent and holy ignorance, adored like one who worships a formless God. A nameless light it could not claim nor own. In a simple purity of emptiness, Her mind knelt down before the unknowable. All was abolished save her naked self and the prostrate yearning of her surrendered heart. So what I did with this was I don't make an effort to learn passages, but I would read one line, I would shut my eyes and repeat it here, and repeat it here, and repeat it here, and then the next line, and the next line. And then they would just live inside you. So, or sometimes when I'm sleeping, just before I sleep, I repeat lines of it. Or very often when I'm teaching yoga, Savitri becomes a very important part of the guided meditation. Or simple things like when we are doing a pranayam, Chandrabhedna, which is piercing the secret of the moon, which is surrender. So maybe when you inhale through the left nostril, you say, herself was nothing. Exhale through the right, God alone was all. Because the right nostril is the sun. So sun is everything and moon is emptiness of nothing. So she guides me to link Savitri to different pranayams that are taught, different meditations that are done. And I'm very grateful for it.
What other books of Mother have touched you so deeply? Prayers and meditations?
Beautiful. I love prayers and meditation. I love that simple compilation, Sunlit Path. I love the All India magazine I get from Pondi every month. I'm so grateful to the person who does it because it's something I look forward to every month. Every month it's compiled just for what I need. And I don't read lots of their books because I feel it's like when I taste a very beautiful drink, I want to sip it in slowly. I don't want to drink lots so my taste buds lose the savor. So I may just read 2 pages, but I may come back in the afternoon and read it again, and night read it again, and throughout the day try to remember that one thing that lit me up. So I've read bits of synthesis. Largely, I would say I like the path of bhakti. So I've read the whole section on bhakti yoga several times, but I can't say I've read the whole synthesis. I've read parts of Life Divine, but all of it doesn't open to me.
Yesterday, I happened to be present when K.C. Anand turned over Mother India to Alak Pandey, who is now the editor as of yesterday. So I think Alok will also do a very beautiful job.
Mother India or All India?
I'm sorry, All India Magazine.
Yes.
All India Magazine.
Yes. I met him at the dining hall today, and he told me he'd handed it over. Yes. Because I just go and thank him every time I see him, because he brings me Pondi every month to my doorstep. Very grateful for it.
Are there others of your age, other than, of course, older people such as Dan and Kumi, with whom you meet and speak or have meditation?
Meditation is always a huge part of the Hatha Yoga classes. Savitri classes at the Bombay Center, we usually end with a relevant meditation. One of my yoga students, Daksha, you met her. She came to Shailaja's house to meet you. Maybe you met so many people.
Yeah.
So she insisted that this Savitri that we are making available to the youth, we need a platform for the older people also. So she has arranged a monthly...
Daksha, I remember Daksha. Now it comes to me.
So she has arranged for us to meet and for us to explore different themes on life once a month. I think it's the second Thursday of each month. So last time we talked about what letting go really means. I mean, letting go is an easy word, but what does really letting go mean? And that wasn't only Savitri. It was a general discussion, a general question answer, and we always end those talks with a meditation, which we collectively do.
In this present time, when we see so much violence in the world, what are you feeling about the force of Sri Aurobindo and Mother have brought to us in the supramental? Do you feel in such a city as Bombay any change?
Oh, Narad,
Or with the new president of India?
President of India, I'm very hopeful, but it's too soon to comment. But about their force, it is so active, Narad. I feel that they are stronger than the most violent mind and See, it's very challenging to teach yoga in a city like Mumbai, where everything in the children's environment contradicts what I'm saying. And I'll share this with you. We were doing one exercise. See, in Bombay, I face a lot of skepticism from students. They want to believe in the tangibles. If I'm talking about miracles or intangible or the deeper part of themselves which they haven't seen, they won't believe me. And the only way they'll believe me is if grace gives them an experience. So I'll tell you this one class. We were doing an exercise where I partnered two children, and they had to shut their eyes, and one partner visualizes a square, triangle or circle here at the Ajna Chakra and sends it to the Ajna of the other to see if they pick it up. Just so that they realize that thoughts are not here. Thoughts are all over and they reach and they have an effect. So, of course, they were distracted. So the first round, maybe one pair out of 10 got it. And they said, miss, this doesn't work. As usual, yoga is just in the air. And I said, no, this can't be. So I just shut my eyes and I really called to Sri Aurobindo. And I said, okay, let's do it again. And I know he was there. I could feel him in the room. And we did it again. And out of 10 pairs, 8 got it. And they were stumped. So what I'm saying is, whatever the milieu, whatever the distraction, whatever the minds, their force is bigger than anything. And it's victorious over. And I see their force working all the time, Nara. That children are so beautiful. If they get one taste of that experience, I mean, the way they open to it, the way they reach out for it, the way they hunger for it. But they need that one taste of experience. They will not believe you if you give them monuments of theory. But they need to experience that this force exists.
And how many have experienced this when you bring so many groups to Pondicherry? And
I'd say
amazing, no?
It's her grace, really. I'd say many experience it, because I first of all feel till she calls them, they won't come. And if they come here, they will never go back empty-handed. And it's so subtle. Like, there was one friend of mine who was in a severe depression because she'd lost her mother. And when we were here on a camp, people were sharing their experiences. She wasn't experiencing anything. And she said, no, this is not really for me. But when we went back to Bombay, she gave me a call and said, I don't know what it is, but I haven't had a day of depression since I'm back. She hadn't consciously experienced, but the atmosphere was working on her.
The other day you sent me this extraordinary experience of Sanaya.
Yes.
Would you tell us a little bit about that?
So Sanaya's a very beautiful girl, and recently she lost her grandmother. And she sent me several messages. She said that she was close to her grandparents. She says, as they were taking my grandma away, I was holding mother's blessing packet in my hand. And I'm feeling so incredibly strong. I can see grace in this also. And I keep waiting for a storm of emotions to come, but it doesn't come. And she came the other evening. Sunday we did a session on what it means to take refuge in the mother in our Savagery. And we discussed that to take refuge in the mother is really to take refuge in life, because everything in life is mother. And she imbibed that so beautifully that she wrote a reflection on it, and that is what was sent to you.
Tell me a bit about your yoga, your Savagery classes. How did they begin?
They began because Hetal Kamdar, who works at the Bombay Center, kept nudging me to do something for the youth. And she came up with the idea of this Savagery class. So I started. I must say, when I began, I also didn't know how to do it. But over the years, I think it's been 3-4 years, mothers guided. And at this moment, there are about maybe 30-35 kids, youth. When I say youth, it could even be up to 25, 26, 30, who come committedly for the Savagery class. And if ever I'm out of town and there's no Savagery, they actually feel like something's been missing in their week. There are some children who are actually reading Savagery every day. So last class I asked, when do you read Savagery? So Darshan says, when I'm in pain, because that's the best way I get out of pain. So it has evolved. It's not like we do Savagery for that full 1.5 hours, because I have a variety of minds. Some minds which are very simple. Plus the youth have a lot of questions they need to sort out at a very ground level. So out of that 1.5 hours, maybe just half an hour, 45 minutes will be Savagery.
That's a lot.
But the rest will be discussion. And it would be different themes, like I told you, relationships. My whole thrust, Narad, is that I feel our kids are messed up, like all of us are, not just kids, because they are looking for themselves in the wrong place. They are looking for themselves in how they exist in other people's mind. So their whole life is about appearing good in other minds. And in Savagery classes, what we try to do is to get them to look for themselves in the right place. Instead of all the time obsessing about how so-and-so thinks of me, to obsess about what is my experience of myself just now. What is the experience of what I am just now with my thoughts, with my emotions. So I find that the youth is innately curious about themselves, but that curiosity is misdirected. They're always trying to figure out, how did I appear to somebody? But if it becomes a curiosity of how do I function? What is my truth in this moment? So our discussions are a lot about self-exploration. Self-exploration from the surface layer to going within, to coming to that space where many of them, like Kumi said, that when they are troubled, earlier they'd like to pick up the phone and ask a friend for advice. But now they like to sit with themselves till answers come from within. So that is what we really try to do, to get the kids to look for themselves in the right place rather than what's not really the true place.
Have the Savagery classes helped them with such important things as peer pressure and parental pressure?
Oh yes, I have one very sweet child, Vikram. He's abroad now, and I told you about him. He went for a summer course to Brown, and he was reading Savagery below a tree. And people his age came to him and asked him that, what are you doing and what is that book? So he said, this is Sri Aurobindo's Savagery. And they said, we are curious about it. So this child, who must have been all of 17, did a whole session with kids his age on Savagery. And he said that on his door that you put up signs, no, do not disturb, come in. Instead of that, every day he'd put up a quote of Savitri. So he'd get a knock on his door and say, hey, what does this mean? Can you explain this? So this child, I'll tell you what he told me about peer pressure. He's in love with Sri Aurobindo. He calls him his best friend. And he says if there's a lot of portion to be studied and he doesn't know what to zero in on, his other friends will say, okay, we think this is important, that is important. But he won't listen to them. He'll just look at Sri Aurobindo and say, tell me. And he said he was guided to do exactly what came in the exam next day. And he says if he's getting stressed while writing a paper, for 30 seconds he'll put down his pen, collect himself, write again. So he's very different, you know, and I often asked him, how do you survive with peers who think so differently of you? So he told me this beautiful thing that once they were out trekking and he was so upset because all his other friends had music in their ears and they weren't listening to the music of the birds and waters. And he told one of them that, look, why don't you take that off? There's so much better music all around. So they all teased him, oh, Sri Aurobindo has come again and all. You know, they tease him like that. So I said, but Vikram, don't you feel upset when you're teased? So he said, no, because I know that what they are teasing is not me. So beautiful. Yes. That I am not what they are teasing. Let them say whatever they like.
And how about anger in the children?
Yeah, we are working on that. As one of my kids spoke to you, we are working on that. Yes, what one child said really worked for her. We did a class on offering. So, you know, in India, there's this story about Samudra Manthan churning the oceans. The oceans were churned by the Asuras and the Devas to get the nectar of immortality, but by default poison came out, halahal, and they called Shiva to drink it, and he drank it and it got stored in his throat. So I told them, Vijay Bhai told me this once, he said, who but the mother can drink our poisons, just the way Shiva drank those poisons. So this story we discussed as the ocean is our prakriti, our nature. Forces of good are devas, forces of evil are asuras, and they are all the time churning us. And in that churning, often a lot of poison comes up. Like lots of kids find that when they go back after Pondi, after a short period of bliss, somehow it's very dense, like all the revolt in their nature comes out. So we did a class on remember and offer. When that poison comes out, don't judge it, don't feel guilty about it, don't think you are that poison, just offer it to the mother. Because like Vijay Bhai says, who but she can drink our poisons. So one child did say that when anger comes up or fear comes up, she does that offering to the mother and she feels much better.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's beautiful.
Yes. So it's, how often do you try to bring the students to the ashram?
I bring them once in their standard 9 and once in standard 10. So over 2 schools, maybe about 4 camps a year. And this year my adult students got after. This year in fact was very special, Narad. Just before you came to Pondi, I'd brought the Savitri group. The group who are not part of school, so
right,
they are older.
Right.
So in a year maybe sometimes 5 camps a year or whatever. But it is so gratifying to see how so many of them go back to Bombay as different people. When I take children back to Bombay, my yoga classes are different, Narad. The chaos, the confusion, I mean, they are so quiet, they are so ingathered, they are so willing to be open to what earlier they'd write off as irrational. I really have so much to thank Mother for. Or one child who I remember couldn't got very hype, used to get very, very hyper during exams, and so make a lot of mistakes, cancellations. Bright child, but would get less marks because of the hyperness. And when she came to Pondi and she was sitting at the Samadhi, we did this meditation of heart and overhead, and she was one of the blessed ones who could feel the overhead coming down. So she used that in Bombay, where before studying, before her exam, she just feel this overhead descending, and then she'd feel like a new person, and all that agitation went away.
And she would do better in
She
her
did,
exams.
yeah, there was no
Yes.
cancellations. She
Yes.
performed, she got her marks. I think the kids also see that yoga is not just feeling good. Yoga is something that makes them more functional as human beings. It is about living. It's not just about feeling good, but about living a different person and so a different life. A happier life, a more productive life, a more functional life. It actually makes the kids more functional, Narad, not just, I would say, peaceful and calm. More functional in their relationships with each other, academically more functional. This Vikram who I'm talking about, the boy who I told
Yes.
you, he had severe dyslexia. And he decided that he's going to be bigger than this disability. And he worked in the light of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. He would read Savagery for an hour every night. And he really worked on himself, and he was one of the top 5-6 in his class with severe dyslexia.
One of the top 5-6.
Yes. Yeah. And he wanted to also be a social entrepreneur. So beautiful. One summer, when kids go for holidays, etc., he'd been working in the slums of Bombay, and he was very moved by the experience. He said that he was invited for a meal in a child's house where in bright daylight it's pitch dark and there are rats running around. And with so much love, the child offered him a plate of food, and he's from a elite, and he says, I didn't want to eat with rats running around, but I saw the love in their eyes and I managed to eat. But that haunted him. He felt, I have to do something for them. So one summer he decided that he looked up the net. I forget the name of an NGO, but there's one NGO, I think Karma or something like that it's called, which works on giving a face to all other NGOs. Like it provides a site where all other NGOs can register. So if somebody wants to sponsor, participate, they learn about it. So Vikram saw so many NGOs not listed on this. So he spent his summer going in the hot sun from NGO to NGO telling them, look, this is available. Why don't you put yourself on it? And he said, some of them told me, buzz off, you're just a kid. But 2-3 of them actually enlisted, and they told him that we are so grateful, we didn't know this existed. And that's what he wants to do. He wants to make a change. That's his goal in life. And he's hugely inspired by Sri Aurobindo's Savagery.
And he's 17, 18 now?
Yeah, he must be 18, 19 now. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing such a wonderful work, Anahita.
Oh, it's her grace, Narad. And I'm very grateful to her for giving me this work. I mean, for me, this work is the best part of my life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Narad. Thank you so much.
I believe this will inspire many children.